Thank you, everyone. We're going to wait for just another minute or so while others join. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we are going to be discussing the payment card industry data security standards and navigating the transition from version 3.2.1 to version 4.0. So before we get into our webinar, we wanted to give you a brief overview of Accorian and some of the services that we offer. So Accorian is a cybersecurity advisory firm, and we serve a global clientele. Large or small, we help businesses with their security posture through a variety of ways. As part of our compliance services offerings, you can see that we perform many types of readiness and full validation assessments like PCI, which we're talking about today, high trust, SOC, and ISO. We also perform penetration testing for our clients and offer a security strategy and consulting services in the forms of things like vCISO and vSecurity teams, just to mention a few. So let's go ahead and get into our topic for today. My name is Andrea Britt. I am Senior Director of the Compliance Services Department here at Accorian. With us today, we have Kieran Murthy, who's Vice President of Enterprise Accounts and one of our qualified security assessors under PCI. So the topics that we intend to cover today, first is we'll give you a brief overview of the payment card industry data security standards and the goals of version 4.0 and the timelines for that transition into 4.0. We're going to focus on some of the critical differences between the current 3.2.1 version and the new 4 version. We'll detail the mandatory updates and for those that are considering and those that are considered best practices until a certain point in time. We'll offer some approaches for the transition and some potential challenges with version 4.0 compliance. We'll let you know the consequences if a business fails to comply with the PCI standards. And then we'll wrap it up with Accorian's methodology to performing a PCI assessment, along with a period for questions and answers. So let me turn it over to Kieran so we can go ahead and get started.
Hey, thanks so much, Andrea. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kieran, working with Accorian as a Vice President Enterprise Account. I'm thrilled to be here with you today and have the opportunity to share the best of my knowledge and some valuable insights on navigating the PCI transition from 3.2.1 to version 4. Today, our goal, me and Andrea, is to provide clear guidance on how to navigate the PCI compliance landscape during and after transition. Now, let's embark on this learning journey together. So without further delay, let's get started. So PCI DSS version 4.0. The critical set of guidelines exists to fortify the safety and the security of credit card information provided by you and me, the cardholder, especially during the complex process of card transaction. Now, if we delve into the fundamentals, the PCI DSS hinges on 12 core requirements. These are the backbones of the security protocol, and here is the interesting part. Even with the advent of PCI DSS version 4.0, these pillars of security haven't undergone any fundamental changes.
So, Kieran, I have a quick question here. So you talk about those 12 pillars of security. Why, with these changes, haven't they undergone any fundamental change?
Let me make a note of it. Yeah, that's a great question, Andrea. So the reason behind this, Andrea, is they are as relevant and crucial today as they were initially formulated. They continue to provide robust foundation necessary for shielding payment card data But there is a twist in the story with the version 4.0. The experts behind the standard took a step back and had a long, hard look at the requirements. What they realized was that it wasn't just about having the rules in place, it was about the why and how behind those rules. So, what did they do? They reshaped these requirements to concentrate more on security objective. It's no longer just a list of do's and don'ts. Instead, it's a guiding light showing business how to implement security control effectively, thoughtfully, and in a way that resonates with bigger picture of wider spread protection. So that's one of the reasons why still the 12 pillars not undergone any fundamental changes.
Got it. Thank you for that, Kieran. So it's clear that while the heart of the PCI DSS requirements remain unchanged, the spirit has been kindled anew, as we can say, with a sharper focus of not just acting, but acting with insight, purpose, and strategic direction. This approach marks a significant stride forward in the way we think about and safeguard sensitive payment card information.
All right. To continue further, pertaining to the merchant level based card transaction, whether you're a large retail processing millions of transactions or a small online store, PCI DSS compliance is essential. These are the four primary merchant level, ranging from level 1, which includes merchant processing over 6 million card transactions per year, to level 4, typically reserved for those processing fewer than 20,000 transactions annually. Please note, different level comes different validation and audit requirement. For instance, a level 1 merchant might need an annual on-site assessment, while level 4 only requires a self-assessment questionnaire. Merchants often have contractual obligation with payment card brands or acquirers to remain compliant with PCI DSS. Considering these factors, quarterly PCI ASV scanning is mandatory for all merchants levels. Also, quarterly scan allows merchants to take proactive approach to their cybersecurity, identifying and patching vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Considering this reason, so these are the four levels of merchant levels. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So we mentioned the conversion from 3.2.1 to version 4.0. So let's go over a couple of the timelines here. We presented a webinar back in August of 2022, not long after version 4 came out. So we just want to kind of remind everybody here what we're dealing with as far as timelines. So as I said, it was officially released in Q1 of 2022. The new version includes 64 updates to the requirements from the previous version of 3.2.1, and we're going to talk about some of those updates a little later in our webinar. Version 3.2.1 is going to remain active until March 31st of 2024. So coming up fairly quickly in the end of first quarter of 2024. This allows organizations to adjust to the new standard. So they've had a year from the instigation of version 4 to kind of adjust and get ready. And then officially on March 31st, 3.2.1 will be retired. So if you are using version 4 from now up until the end of March of 2024, 13 of those 64 updates are mandatory. The remaining 51 are considered best practices for another full year until March 31st of 2025. And then at which time all of those 64 updates will become mandatory. So PCI version 4 really stresses that security must be an ongoing thing and not just a one-off. So Kieran, what are your thoughts on the differences there between 3.2.1 and version 4?
Yeah, especially when we compare between the 3.2.1 and version 4.0, at the end of the day, whether it's a version 3.2.1 or the 4, when we swipe our cards, it's all about ensuring our money and the information stays safe. But if you look at the version 4, pushing for the security is an ongoing thing, but they have added some flexibility, a new way to meet the PCI v4 close. Plus, they have tripped up the validation methods. For the organization, this means they must have tougher password, make everyone use multi-factor authentication, When accessing the card info, check your privilege accounts, check user accounts, more training for the team, and do a thorough risk check. It's all about keeping data safe and sound. So if you also look at some of the changes when it comes to the scope validation standpoint, initially it was an annual exercise where organization used to take it. Now it should be validated by assessor. That's one of the bigger change. Implementation of stronger password rules with an increase in minimum length from 7 to 12 characters, and also prohibition of hard coding passwords in files or script. Mandatory multi-factor authentication for all access to the card data environment, and also including the administrative access as well. Automated log reviews conduct daily rather than option of manual reviews. Measure of safeguard against phishing attacks, including the regular staffing as well. One of the most important, or I would say the dynamic one, is the targeted risk assessment. So conducting more comprehensive, specific, and the targeted one. So performing regular PCI scope confirmation. So always I recommend have a discussion with your QSA. So some of them might be having a legacy system. So for an example, issuer now must encrypt the sensitive authentication data that they may be storing. This may not be a big deal for most of the issuer at this point of time, but may be difficult for some legacy system where encryption software is not readily available. In 3.2.1, a web application firewall or a process document should be used. But here in the version 4.0, it is make sure that you have the web application firewall exposed to internet as well. My suggestion is to discuss with your QSA at regular interval of time to have the more clarity. Also, you can understand the testing phase as well. Doing things their way. In other words, the older version had a security checklist, which business had to follow. Now with the version 4.0, it's more about why they are doing it. So business can pick and choose the security steps that fit them the best. Two ways to check. In the new version 4.2, there are two ways. Business can show they are keeping data safe the usual way, which is called as defined approach. And the new, more flexible, the customized approach, which we'll be discussing in our further slides. Both the version tells business to always be alert about the security, but version 4 really hammers home the idea of being security aware at the times. Pick your tech. The new way is that you have the flexibility to choose the different security tools as long as they do the job right. So these are the few critical difference between 3.2.1 and version 4.
So as previously mentioned, and as Kieran just touched on in that critical differences slide, we mentioned that there are 13 of the updated requirements that if you choose to use version 4 at this point are mandatory. You must comply with 13 of the 64. So those are 10 of these focus on roles and responsibilities. So that roles and responsibilities are being documented, assigned, acknowledged, or understood for the requirements that are listed here, the 10 requirements that are listed here. You can see for secure configurations, protected stored account data, protected cardholder data with strong encryption, systems and networks for malware protection, developing and maintaining secure systems and software, restrict access to the cardholder environment and system components by business need to know, identifying users and authenticating access to system components, restricting physical access to the cardholder data environment, logging and monitoring that access, and then regularly testing the security of the systems and the networks. So those are 10 of the 13, and the remainder are, if using that customized approach that Kieran touched on, and we're going to discuss a little bit further, roles and responsibilities need to also be documented and assigned. So scope is documented, as Kieran mentioned, and confirmed at least every 12 months. Or if the assessed entity is a service provider, that scope documentation and confirmation needs to occur every 6 months. Or for both entities, a regular entity or a service provider, whenever there is a significant change to that cardholder data environment. The final mandatory requirement of using 4.0 now is if the entity is that third-party service provider, they must respond to any request from their customers to provide their PCI compliance status. So Kieran, before you proceed with explaining the version 4 approach, I intentionally added this slide because it can be very confusing when an organization is trying to choose between that defined approach that you talked about and that new customized approach. So can you get into that a little bit more?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would say that welcome aboard for version 4.0, Andrea, because when it comes to version 4.0, there is two important things, which is defined and in a customized approach. Let's dive into the topic that's more about the PCI rulebook that companies follow. To ensure customers' credit card information is locked up tighter than the Fort Knox, now the version 4 is like the latest edition of this rulebook. And it comes with some exciting flexibility, which is called as the customized approach. First thing first, the goal behind these rules hasn't changed. That's the most important, which I want to highlight. We are still all about safeguarding payment data, keeping up the new threats, and making security an ongoing journey. But here is a game changer with version 4.0. It's all about embracing the different security tools and the strategy as long as they meet the rulebook objective. So how do we do that? In the version 4.0, introduced a two-way, as I explained to you earlier, the defined and the customized approach. Let me explain with an example. Picture this as a traditional route, which is the defined approach. It's like using a well-out recipe that your grandma gave you, Andrea. So you follow the steps. In our world, we call it as security requirement, as they are clearly written. If for some reason you cannot use an ingredient or meet the requirements, you can substitute, for example, we used to call it as compensating control, as long as the end result, the security level, isn't compromised. This isn't new. It's been go-to method since as far as 2013 when the version 3.0 was around. Now with the customized approach, now this is where things get spicy. Think, Andrea, you are a perfect chef where you know your kitchen inside out and you're confident about trying different ingredients. In other words, coming back to the reality, if a company is experienced and understand its own risk very well, it can use the different methods or technology to meet the objective of each security rule. But there is no specific to follow here. So the testers, in other words, like us, the Accorian, the QSA company, the assessor will need to create their own test to make sure the dish still meets the high standards. This fresh, the customized path is exciting because it recognizes the company are not cookie cutter model of each other. We all have the unique environment challenges and strength. With the PCI DSS version 4.0, we're now in a better position than ever to use innovative and cutting edge practice to protect our customer, all while following the guidelines suited to our specific needs. It's all about the fantastic world of PCI DSS compliance.
So in other words, when adopting that customized approach, it's vital that the organization has a strong understanding and a robust security environment, as creating that customized approach could potentially be perplexing for any organization and the external assessor. What are your thoughts about that, Kieran?
It's crucial for organization to clearly document rationale behind each customized control. So you have seen the example here between the traditional approach and the customized approach. Physical security, where you need to implement surveillance camera, but in customized approach, you can use the combination of biometric access control or IoT enabled monitoring system. One important thing in the customized approach is all customized controls and the related document must be supported by an adequate risk assessment activity. This is where I was telling in the first slide that it has a targeted risk assessment. So here, whenever you're using the customized control, make sure you have the adequate risk assessment activity. This activity should determine that the level of protection achieved is at least equivalent to 1 using the standard defined implementation. Okay, so in the meantime, whatever you define, the documentation you need to provide to the QSA as well that describes the customized implementation for each requirement.
So when you, as a qualified security assessor, a QSA, receive that documentation, what are then your responsibilities and your capacity as the QSA for that particular assessment?
I'll pass. Just kidding. So in my role as a QSA, in order to conduct an evaluation for the customized validation first, I will examine the documentation submitted by the organization, and I'm going to create the testing procedure tailored to the implemented control and documentation supplied to me by the organizations that this is the customized approach I've used. And also in my report on compliance, I record the specific of the testing procedure employed and the outcome pertaining to that. As we discussed, when it comes to customization, let's coming back to the example of customization standpoint. If you see here, let me take an example of multi-factor authentication. So in the traditional approach, you have to implement the multi-factor authentication for all remote. But in the customized approach, where you need to have the zero trust, let's say you implement a zero trust network architecture, you need to prepare a documentation on that, why you have used the zero network architecture, what are the risks pertaining to that, what are the access you have provided, how you enable the multi-factor authentication. You need to provide all these details before we proceed further on that. These are the few examples between the traditional and the customized approach.
So if I'm thinking about getting my company compliant with PCI DSS version 4, how might we go about that?
Oh, yeah, sure. When it comes to the approach or the implementation of PCI version 4.2, let me consider myself as a consultant or an internal employee. The first step is that whenever there is a change of version 3.2.1, the first and foremost step is that I'll spend more time in understanding the changes. What are the changes? And I'll call all the stakeholders as well. We'll have a one round of meeting with them, provide a brief walkthrough on the changes, and initiate the gap assessment as well. Gap assessment plays a very vital role here because what we'll do is that we'll take a look at gaps where we stand pertaining to PCI DSS version 4.0 compliance right now. We'll spot any gaps and also take a note of any weak spots that hacker might exploit. So that's a very important step. So you'll get to know where you stand. Next, I'll be conducting a risk assessment. So understand the potential vulnerabilities and threats. Conducting the awareness training. So if you look at the process, what we have defined here is like awareness training will be coming in the second phase itself. The reason behind that is ensure that all stakeholders understand the importance and the implication for PCI DSS version 4.2.0. It's not easy for any company to adapt immediately to the changes of the version 4.0. So that's one of the reasons, we need to conduct a training session to familiarize the team with the new requirements so that they also understand the version 4. The most important is the review cycle. If you look at the review cycle standpoint, people, process, and technology. So technology, because PCI DSS is more of a technological standard. So I would suggest, what I would do is that I'll review the security technologies and the tools what I have. If any changes to be made, so I'll determine if they align to version 4.0, or if upgrade or any replacement are necessary, we'll be going ahead and do it as well. And most important in the technology is that ensure that continuous security monitoring system is in place. Next important phase, which is the objective-based planning. So we need to work with the stakeholders to decide which approach, as I told you in the previous slide, whether we'll go with the do's and don'ts or the customized. Customized approach is always a double sword because whatever we decide, we need to provide the documentation what suits the organization best, given the flexibility of version 4.0. And then we will develop a plan that addresses the objective behind the controls, allowing the organization to adapt to measure the unique environment. Next, make sure you start preparing the documentation, policy, and procedure. Revise and update all the internal policies and procedure so that you should be aligned to version PCI DSS version 4.0. That's very important. Develop a clear documentation that outlines organization approach. If you're using customized approach, you need to have the detailed documentation, do a targeted risk assessment, and submit to your assessor. And also make sure the scope document, which you have to get an approval from your assessor as well. Next is on the implementation standpoint. I'm sorry. Address the gaps identified during the initial assessment, deploy new technology or upgrade the existing one, test and validate the effectiveness of the each and every control, regularly monitor how is it's working for you, and make sure that you have the continuous monitoring system to detect potential breach or non-compliance. Review and update your risk assessment regularly as to address the evolving threats. Keep a logs of all the security instance and response. And finally, take the feedback. It's always important to take the feedback regularly and improve your process. Stay updated and stay informed about the changes and the clarification to version 4.0. Engage with PCI communities or forum like the Accorian, where we give a lot of updates, what are the changes, or we'll also provide a lot of threat updates to our customer as well. So try to join that kind of official channel to remain updated on best practices and guidelines. These are the overall the transition process pertaining to PCI DSS version 4.0.
Great. So thank you for that, Kieran. So now I'd like for you to remove your QSA hat and tell me, as a consultant, what challenges might your organization face with this new version of PCI?
It's always easy to be an assessor than a consultant. Just kidding. So coming back to the challenges with the version 4.0, certainly the introduction of any new compliance iterations such as PCI version 4.0 brings a set of challenges for organization. Some of the, I would say that it's worth noting that while these challenges exist, they are absolutely doable with the proper planning, resource, and expertise. If you look at the goal of PCI DSS is to ensure secure handling of the cardholder data. And these challenges, when addressed, can lead to more secure environment. So you have already listed some of the security challenges. Let's pick up some of the things. So understanding the new framework, most of them they fail in understanding because PCI version 4.0 introduces significant changes, especially in the version 4. The structure and the approach of the previous versions, and now with the organization now would need to familiarize themselves with these changes and understand, and they have to adapt to the specific environment. Customized approach, yes. While the new version provides the flexibility through its customized approach, as I told you earlier, it's a double-edged sword. Determining the most appropriate control, especially if they deviate from one standard requirements, can be complex. I remember the Spider-Man movie quote, which is suitable for customized approach. With great power comes great responsibility. So always be careful whenever you decide the customized approach, because you need to do a lot of, I repeat again, you need to make sure, have the documentation, risk analysis, and then also talk to your assessor, get the complete, what are the testing process for that particular customized approach, get a buy-in from your assessor, and then proceed further as well. Documentation, yes, it increased compared to 3.2.1. There is a lot of documentation. Any customized approach, you have to provide the documentation. So in that way, there is a lot of increase in the documentation. technological standards. Some of the requirement might need technological upgrade or overhauls, which can be time consuming and also expensive as well. So regular awareness training. So on the new requirements on the organization specific controls. In this, it's like all levels should be included. Targeted risk assessment. Yeah, as I along with your annual risk assessment, you have to perform the targeted risk assessment, and it's more crucial with the version 4.0, where the assessors will spend a lot of time in understanding what are the potential threats you have identified, what are your weaknesses. So in that way, the risk assessment might be a little challenging for the organization. Continuous monitoring, where real-time monitoring is also emphasized in version 4.0. Resource, yes, it's always been a challenge, any new version. So it's you need to have the budget for the resource constraint. You need to manage your vendors. Vendor management, it's always, we can manage our organization at the same point of time. Here in PCI, you have to manage your vendors as well. That's an additional pain because with the increased scrutiny on the third-party vendors, now organization have the added responsibility of ensuring their vendor are also compliant. That's a challenge. And what I can do, the last one is the validation challenges, providing the effectiveness of customized controls to an assessor might be more challenging than the following defined control. All right. So, what are the consequences if a business failed to comply? So, thanks, Andrea, for bringing up the slide. So, this is the most common question. What we hear is like, what if I don't comply with the PCI DSS? What will gonna happen? So, just to remind, it's essential for business to take PCI DSS compliance seriously and invest in robust security measures to protect the payment card data. If business is non-compliant with the PCI DSS and suffers a data breach, several consequences and actions can occur. So the fines are substantial and they can have the significant financial impact on non-compliance. Therefore, it's crucial for organizations that handle the payment card data to take the PCI compliance seriously and invest in necessary security measures. PCI DSS itself does not prescribe specific financial penalties for non-compliance. Instead, the financial penalties from the non-compliance with the PCI DSS are typically imposed by the payment card brands and acquiring banks. So please make a note of that. That is not the PCI DSS, it's from the payment card brands and acquiring banks. These entities have their own policies and a fee structure for dealing with the non-compliance. So here we have listed some of them, like fines from payment card brands. So payment card brands can impose fines on the businesses that do not comply. The fines can vary widely depending on the severity of non-compliance and number of payment card records compromised as well. Acquiring bank may also impose fine on the non-compliant merchants. These fines can be based on number of violations and the risk associated with the non-compliance. There are high transaction, loss of business, legal costs. So most importantly, what we need to understand is the transaction non-compliant business may face higher transaction fees as a result of their non-compliance. Acquiring bank may charge higher processing fees to cover the increased risk associated with handling the transaction for non-compliant merchants. These are the few, I would say that the consequences if business fail to comply with the PCI DSS.
So it sounds like if you're a merchant, you need to be extra careful, making sure you're compliant. So you don't have to spend additional funds and you can continue to accept credit cards as payment, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You're rightly said, Andrea. Coming back to Accorian, we have our own methodology, so meeting all your PCI requirements. So we have a separate division for PCI DSS, and we have a separate wing for the ASV. We are ASV scanning vendors as well. So coming back to the auditing and consulting, so when we come for implementation and assessing, the first thing what we do is the gap assessment, which is always important whenever you're transferring from 3.2.1. It's very important you to understand what are the changes in the version 4. So we conduct a gap assessment, review your current, the security posture. Where do you stand? What are the additional things you need to do? So we do the gap assessment and provide you the picture, and we also can build a roadmap as well, that in the duration how you can comply with the version 4.0. As part of our assessment, we also confirm the scope. That's the QSA activity, where whatever the identification of scope, we'll conduct a confirmation scope, and cardholder data flow architecture as well. So where the data, card data started and where it ends. So where do you store, where do you process, where do you transaction? We'll make a list of that security architecture. We also can write the policy and procedure, and during the implementation, so if you have any questions or if you need any clarification related to implementation, we are having a separate vertical for the advisory. Before the QSA audit, we have the internal team, so they will kind of support the implementation team precisely. So they will come and do the pre-audit. They'll make sure that they prep you for the external audit as well. In Accorian, we have the segregation of duties. The implementation team will not be part of the conducting the assessment. So we have a separate division for assessment. We have a separate division for the QA and separate division for the implementation as well. That's what we make it very special as Accorian. Coming back to the penetration testing, we are certified ASV scanning vendor. We will be able to take activities like penetration testing, the vulnerability assessment. We can do the IoT exercise as well. If you want your code to be reviewed, we have a team, so they will be reviewing the security code review as well. And if you're as per part of the security awareness requirement, we need to do a lot of phishing tests. So we have a separate wing, so where we can do the phishing test as well. Roadmap sustenance, we have the sustenance plan. We have our in-house Gorico tool, where we will identify all your tasks, all your requirements. We have the different architectures. So explicitly, we made it for PCI, so where we can track the entire data so that you will be sustenance activities being managed. We'll also make sure that your evidence population, your month-on-month, will submit your compliance report. And we also conduct the internal audits for the betterment of your organization as well. This is our one-stop solution, meeting all your PCI requirements.
Great. Thanks for that, Kieran. Well, thanks everybody for attending. We have a little bit of time for some questions. I know we've received some from the audience, and we have some others that came from previous webinars that we've done. So I think we'll just answer as many as we can. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get back to you via email with any answers to questions that you might have submitted. Does that work okay for you, Kieran?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Please. Yeah.
Okay. So our first one is, why is PCI DSS important? I think we talked about that quite a bit on the what happens if you don't comply, but is there anything else that you can offer there?
Yeah, in a simple terms, it's a very important because it helps prevent data breach or fraud, keeping your customer card data safe and maintaining your trust in your business. So PCI DSS is a wonderful standard, so that helps you.
So what if I'm just a small business? Do I still need to comply with PCI DSS?
Absolutely. So as we have given the different levels, and if you in the previous slide 6, in the introduction, we have told there are different levels of the merchants. PCI DSS is applied to business of all size, whenever they handle the payment card data. Compliance requirement might vary from level 1 to level 4. As I told you earlier, level 1 might need the on-site assessment. For level 4, it may be the self-assessment questionnaire as well. But it's essential to protect the card information no matter how small your business is. So it is applicable for them.
Thanks. So how long does it take for an organization to become PCI DSS compliant?
It's a very tough question. You have seen our slide. There are a lot of is it version 4 or is it it's an existing version? Version 4, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Version 4, the time to achieve the compliance, it really varies, depending on your current security measures and the complexity of your payment card environment. So it's essential to start and work systematically through. It depends. If I say that if you're a small business, typically it takes about 3 to 6 months approximately. Again, sometimes I've seen a customer taking even more than a year as well. So first and foremost, get a buy-in from the management, the tool, and also the approach identification that plays a very vital role. So it generally it depends about 3 to 6 months, or it may even it's all about the organization environment. So it's depending on the complexity of the payment card environment, Andrea.
So as you stated, it's important to start early and then
Oh, yeah.
work through that process systematically. Get it?
Absolutely.
Or do you have any questions there from the audience that we need to answer?
I have responded over the chat as well to a few questions which I've answered. And can you help us with PCI compliance? Yes, absolutely. Our company specializes in helping the business. I have already told you about our methodology. To be honest, we are really specialized in helping business like yours achieving the PCI DSS compliance. We offer tools, services, and expertise to make the process smoother and ensure your cardholder data is secure. So we'll try our level best on that. Apart from that, how much does the PCI DSS compliance cost? The cost of compliance can vary depending on the factor like size of your business, your current security measures, and the solutions you choose. We can provide you with a detailed cost estimated tailored to your needs. So we may take some more time on that. I think that's all the questions I could see. Oh yeah, there are
That's all I have.
one more. There is multi-factor authentication is required for all remote access or to the cardholder environment or any environment. No, it's very specific to the cardholder environment where they have access to the card data environment. So that's where it is more relevant for them. The next question is, does the new PCI guidance primarily apply to merchant who are accepting the card data? Not much impact to bank whose issue. Just one important thing when it comes to the merchant compliance is that as I told you earlier, whether you're a small or a big, it depends on that. There is about 8 SAQs. Looking at your transaction, what is your storage, whether you belong to which category. Based on that, we would be able to define more relevant on the merchant compliance. Then I join a bank which issues to maintain the card data. Yeah. So
I think we have time for about one more question if we can.
Yeah.
If we have one.
I don't see any other questions. So
all right, we are right on time then. All right, we want to thank everybody for attending our webinar today. This will be available, I believe, on our YouTube channel in the future if you'd like to come and revisit this particular webinar along with some of the other ones that we've done in the past. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.